What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Ultra Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Corcione. What's super exciting is you might be listening to this or you might be watching this now, as I'm starting to get on YouTube too. So whether you're watching or listening, super excited for you to join in. And what's super cool is we have a guest who is on here for the second time on the Everyday Ultra Podcast. I really loved our conversation that we had the first time, and I wish we could have dove into so much more, but it was really great because I saw our guest today on the Black Canyon Trail a few weeks ago, and I reminded him, I was like, oh, there he is. Like, let's reach out. Let's get him on the podcast here because he's also training for the Black Canyon 100K, which we have coming up here in, just about a few weeks from this recording here. And he's been training hard after it. He's also had some exciting new life developments on the way, such as a new relationship and spending time with kids and really just leaning into all the things in his life. So we're going to talk about that a lot more. And I'm just really excited to bring on this guest today too, not just because he's a great runner, but as I mentioned too in the last podcast, such a great guy, one of the nicest dudes I think I've met in the ultra community by far. So I'm excited to have him on again. Jacob Puzey. Jacob, thanks so much for coming on again, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course. Of course, man. I'm happy you're here as well. You're looking strong heading into Black Canyon. So I definitely want to talk about that and everything else. But and I know we covered kind of like your background into running in the first time we chat. So anyone listening who wants to listen to Jacob's background, check out that first episode. I'll put that in the show notes as well to check out. But I'm curious, since the last time we chatted, I believe it was like last summer until now, right? That's a long time coming. I'm curious, what is like new in your world and maybe some insights and some takeaways you've had? You threw your hat in the ring at Javelina Jundred, like I mentioned, got in a new relationship, but I'm curious to hear like what are some kind of like big highlights or takeaways that you've had over the past month since we last chatted?
Yeah, a lot has changed in the last few months and years. Just busy. I mean, I wear a lot of hats, like you mentioned. I'm a dad to 4 kids, and I'm a race director. Have over 30 events that I direct throughout Canada. Try to still run and compete as well as I can. I coach athletes from all over the world and manage other coaches and other race directors with what I do. So it's a lot of managing, so to speak. It's all connected to running in some form or another. I've been really fortunate to be able to reconnect with my family. Was able to connect for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, the New Year. It's been a long time. Hadn't seen some of my siblings and some of my nieces and nephews. Hadn't even met one of my nephews over the last 3 or 4 years. So it was really good to just like get everyone together. And that is definitely one of the highlights of the last since we last spoke. And then like you mentioned, I'd been I would say single the last few years. I didn't like update my status. It was kind of complicated. My personal and professional life was intertwined pretty heavily. And so, when people look at you as someone who's holding it together, and maybe even has like a Cinderella story to their life, it's not fun to admit failure or just even be public about any of it. So yeah, there were a few years of trying and also just kind of keeping up the facade. I try to be authentic, and so it wasn't like I wasn't still trying, but I also wasn't out there put myself out there. I guess I'd kind of given up on on marriage and just wanted to focus on being the dad I signed up to be and trying to be the best person I could be and employer and coach and, focus on the things that I could control and not worry about the things that I couldn't. And lo and behold, somehow through the running community, I swore I'd never get on a dating app, never didn't like, and I'm not knocking anyone that does, but I full on was not trying like get into anything. But I just reconnected with someone that I actually met at Javelina before. I think you and I spoke before the first time that I ran Javelina, and so Brittany and I met briefly at Javelina in 2021, and she passed me and was crushing it, and I was not crushing it when she passed me. And again, like I said, we spoke briefly, but then just didn't really. I honestly, like, I kind of live under a rock. I'm not like terribly social. Like, I had no clue who she was in terms of what her status was as an athlete, other than like I think I had read an I Run Far article or something like that about her. But like, yeah, I've been kind of out of the loop for a long time, and that's intentional. I just try not to get too caught up in the hype. So it was like humbling to meet her when I did, and then it was like quite surprising that we connected the way we did, and that there was interest, and that like it took me a while to realize that there was interest, and yeah, I mean, it was mutual, obviously, but I'm believe it or not, like, despite the bravado or whatever. I don't know. However I present myself publicly, my public persona, I'm a very introverted, quite shy guy, especially when it comes to relationships. So I'm not terribly confident in that realm. So I was, especially, yeah, kind of given my past track record, so to speak, I wasn't looking for anything. But at any rate, we connected, and then just went for a run, and I had been planning on doing Javelina, and she wasn't sure what she was doing, and then she crushed me on that run. So I was like, hey, you know what? that was a big 40-mile mountain loop. You're pretty fit. And I think it was like a week after she had won like a local 50-miler. And so I was like, why are you talking about like crewing me or pacing me at Javelina? Why don't you just run Javelina? And so she signed up and ran it, and did quite well. And so, yeah, we hung out after the race there, and then just kind of, we had both just planned on being down in Arizona anytime. Like, she's an instructor at a university, so she has like holidays off that the students have off, and so she was planning on being down in Arizona to train, and I was planning on being down there as well to be with my family, and so we just kind of coordinated our schedules to be down there at the same time. Well, it just kind of so happened that we were going to be, so we just kind of kept reconnecting, and wanted to spend more and more time together. So started as, fun to run and visit, and then it was kind of like, hey, you're cool, and like anytime I'm down there, I'm visiting family, including two of my children, and so wanted to maximize time with my kids, but also wanted to maximize time with her. And so I'm sure counselors and everyone else would say that that's wrong to introduce them to, partners or potential partners. But it's like, this is a good, solid person that like wasn't even sure what the status of our relationship was. It was like, hey, we just ran 100 miles. Want to go bowling with me and my kids, and I have a daughter, and I think it's pretty badass that she's such a badass. So it's like, I don't have a problem introducing my daughters to someone who is strong and confident and capable and educated, and yeah, like, so it's what I did. And then we just kept doing it.
That is so awesome. I'm so happy for you that you found like someone who, for both of you, that you found each other who are like both tough and both, wanting to get to know each other, not just as runners, but as good people, like you mentioned before. And I've been like loving like following the journey on Instagram of you posting even like the story of your kids, like getting excited to see her and everything. Like that is just so special, man. Like I even just get a little emotional just thinking about like how special that is for you to do that. I'm curious, like from your perspective, like, because I mean you're still training hard for like Black Canyon and kind of have like your load of other things too. How do you like approach, I guess, this relationship, and whether it's a relationship with Brittany, but also maybe a relationship with your kids and family, and balance it in tandem with training, like in a way where you're able to maximize your time in all those areas, right? Because we have tons of people who are listening to the podcast who, maybe they work a job, they have a family and kids, but they also like want to train, for ultras and everything. And as you know, it takes time. I remember you mentioned on the last podcast that you mentioned, it's like, not like you can only run like, a few little hours and train for 100-mile or 100K race. So how do you approach those things? And maybe, whether it's in the light of, your new relationship or your kids, to really maximize, your time in all those areas?
A few things that I've learned, I guess, recently, or that I've tried kind of adopted as I've gotten more and busier, both as a parent and professionally, is that good enough is usually good enough. And so like, just do what you can, and then don't sweat it if you can't do everything. Like, not all of us is going to be able to train like the pros. And yeah, this is part of what I do for a living, but it's not what pays the bills. And so, yeah, I try and fit it in around my kids' schedules. I still bring my kids to school, pick them up from school, make their lunches, try to, attend their activities, and somehow, respond to all the emails and make all the updates to the websites, and, write the training plans, have the sponsorship calls. There's just like anyone else. I definitely work more than full time, but I also still try to fit my runs in when I can, often during the workday. Occasionally, if I like, sometimes I can do something like there's a group in town of guys that goes out once a week, and so if I can make it a social run and can have those couple hours off from being dad, I feel like that's me taking care of myself, so that I can kind of putting the oxygen mask on so that I can help my kids out. So I feel like prioritizing my health helps. I don't view it as selfish in so far as I feel like it actually helps me show up more when I am there with my kids to read to them at night, or I feel fulfilled in who I am, and therefore I can better support them, what they're doing. It has been somewhat, it's never easy. Like, I mean, I actually feel kind of guilty. I feel bad. Brittany is I think the reigning course record holder on Black Canyon, and she's been injured for like over a year. She's been trying to figure out what's going on. Doing all sorts of things. Like, I've never seen anyone dedicate so much time to trying to do all the little things, and it's still, she's beginning to get some answers, but it's been really frustrating. So it's actually, it's been hard to not feel bad about being excited about Black Canyon. She doesn't make me feel bad, but I know that, we were both hoping to run Black Canyon, and she's just hasn't been able to put the training together to be able to do it. Even though she's run one of the best races ever on that course. And so, she's actually been really generous with her experience and with her insight, and tried to help me, even though I've run it before. She kind of told me what she did in the lead up. And so that's some of what I was doing when you and I saw one another on the course. She said that she broke the course down into 2 50Ks, and I'm not quite that ambitious, so I broke it down into 2 like 25 milers, and then it's like, I've run that last 10 miles plenty of times. I don't need to do it this weekend. So, but even with her, just trying to juggle, what we can to spend the time together that we can. We were both down there that weekend. She decided to ride the trail, and I ran it with my friend Caleb Schiff, who I've known for several years, since the time that I lived and was going to school in Flagstaff years ago. He's planning on racing it as well, and he's getting fit, so it's fun to run both those days with him. And then we also tried to spend as much time as I could, with my kids. So I dropped my kids off at school on Friday, drove down the mountain, and ran with Caleb, and then picked Brittany up at the airport, and then tried to reconnect with my kids after running the second day, and did as much as I could with them, and even on a non-running side of things, just tried to connect and do things with Brittany. So we went to Horseshoe Bend, which is a place we've both driven. I was born in the Southwest. I've lived there for a quarter of my life and driven by it tons of times, seen everyone's pictures on Instagram from it, never stopped. So we finally just said, you know what, let's just slow down. And even though we were trying to escape a snowstorm, we got snowed in both ways, in and out of Flag, but we were able to get out finally. And it was clear enough that we were able to stop and just go there and take that time to, do a non-running thing. And that was meaningful to us. It's a place we've always wanted to go, but we just always put it off, and that happened to be the time to do it. So we did. So.
That's awesome. That's so cool that you got to you knew it was something that you two wanted to do, and everything can be so fast paced, like you mentioned, when it's picking up kids, working on the business, doing the training, but you're just you know what, let's just slow down and actually let's take the detour and let's go to this place and enjoy it. And that's so awesome that you had that. And I want to also highlight the point that you mentioned earlier on how you going out and running and taking care of your health, both physically and also socially and mentally, like you mentioned before, spending time with people and everything, that lifts your cup up enough to pour into, the things that you're doing with your family, with your kids, with Brittany and everything like that. And I think it can be an easy thing, at least in my experience, when you're out running or out doing these things, to feel a little guilty at sometimes, or feel like you're not spending up the time. But to your point, it's you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You got to take care of yourself before you take care of others. And I love that point so much. I love it. You talked about Black Canyon too. So sorry to hear about Brittany's and all of her struggles. I agree. She has one of the best races ever on that course. So the day that she's able to get out there, I'm so stoked to see what she can do. And I know that, even if this year doesn't pan out, I'm sure it won't be the last time we'll be seeing her out there for sure. Before we dive into Black Canyon, though, I'm curious, on the aspects of ultra running and training. Are there any kind of principles or kind of lessons that maybe you take away from your ultra training that you almost bring into the way that you spend time with your family or interact with them, in a way that kind of translates? Because I'm always curious to see the way that people translate the things that they learn in their running in their everyday life. And so is there anything that kind of comes to mind that you take away from your running and training that you apply, to your relationships, to spending time with your kids and all those things?
Yeah. I mean, it's easier said than done. I think maybe, the principle of good enough, that we talked about earlier, just just being okay with being okay. I would say I have a propensity toward perfectionism, and that isn't necessarily always a good thing. So I strive for excellence, but sometimes that can, getting that A+ versus the A, a lot of times it takes 2 to 3 times more time or effort to just get that last little bit. It's does it really matter? No. And is there even time to? Probably not. So part of it is just good enough, just being okay with being good enough. And then the other piece I would say is chunking. I used to be a teacher and taught foreign languages, but also taught literacy. And so people talk about chunking the text, like breaking it down into small pieces, breaking a race or partitioning a race into smaller pieces can be really important. So going from one aid station to the next on the Black Canyon course, going from one cactus to the next, one bend to the next, from single track to double track, whatever that partition is, or whatever that segment is that you decide to break it down into, just be present and focus on that, whatever it is, wherever you're at. Ryan Hall wrote a book called Run the Mile You're In. That's a good practice. And Britt and I were actually just talking about it, just with everything we've got going on. Like I said, just view it like an ultra. You know how to nail that, and sometimes we do get lucky and we get to like have those crew accessible aid stations, and that's where we really refill our cup. Like we get our special goodies that we can't carry with us, or that that we don't get at the other aid stations, and we sometimes just get to see our people, and that lifts our spirits. And we get the hugs, we get the extra gear, the drop bag, whatever it may be. But so I would say there's a lot that can be applied to regular life, having that crew, that core crew of people. Some people are solitary, and some people don't necessarily want to rely on other people, and that's okay. I don't fault them. I think that you gotta surround yourself by the right crew of people with the right energy. Like I know some people, if they see you looking like you're going to faint, or even just not looking well, they're going to be more anxious, and they're going to actually probably psych you out. And so you maybe don't want those people necessarily. Like if they're going to be more worried about worst possible scenarios versus like, okay, this is part of the drill. Like this is a normal thing. Just like, take some salts or drink this or eat this and then get back out there. Or, some people just, the thought of being out there for several hours is, some people just aren't cut out for that, and they'll make you feel bad about that. And so you don't want that negative energy. So in the same way, and it doesn't make them bad people. It's just some people just don't get it, and whereas some people live for that. Like it feeds them as much as it feeds you, and so their positive energy like reignites you. And I mean, I've been really fortunate to, I guess I've had positive and negative experiences with crew and pacers and stuff like that, and I guess I've just learned, probably better off not having a crew or pacer if they're going to be negative. And so and yet at the same time, if you can surround yourself by good people. And I'm really fortunate to have some really good people in my life, probably more than I need, for this coming race. Like I'm really stoked. Like I feel like the luckiest dad alive. Like I've asked my kids, like I'm going to be down there. It's like, hey, I'm going to run this race. Like we can hang out before, we can hang out after, but do you guys want to be there? It means we're going to probably have to wake up at like 4 a.m. and we're going to be like, driving in the dark, and you're going to be hanging out, out in the desert. And I don't know, like it could be all day, might even go to the night. You guys cool with that? Yeah, we want to be there. We love being at your races. It's like, I've really tried not to, shove running down my kids' throats and stuff like that. And, I want it to be something that they choose. And so, but my son has been at he was at my very first ultra, and he's been at the last two Javelinas, and he says he wants to be there. He's not only does he want to miss a day of school so he can be down there with me, but he full on wants to be there, and he knows what to do, and he knows what I need, and he genuinely cares about me. But he, just seeing him motivates me to want to show up and dig deeper and make him proud. And I have other, people who become friends that started as athletes that I was coaching, but have become dear friends and like almost like family, and got two or three people in the Phoenix area that have been my crew for the last two Javelinas, and they're going to be there. And then I have several, craft teammates that are racing. And so we're going to have a little bit more of a craft presence. And, so I've got other people that will be part of that crew. And Brittany's going to be down there, and she's going to help as well. And my daughter, will be there. And so, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really stoked about that. Some people will say that that's obnoxious to have that many people, and, causes crowding and stuff like that. And I totally get that. But, they'll be at the crew accessible spots, and I am confident that they will make me want to dig deeper when I'm going through those rough patches. And then it will make the celebratory meal and drinks even more rewarding with them. So yeah.
That is awesome, man. Wow. Now I'm even more pumped for your race, because you got like an army of support behind you, I feel like, which is just so awesome. And I love that too, because it makes me like just think about the potential that you're going to have out there, because it's so powerful to see someone you like really care about, especially like when it's like your kids or something. And I don't have kids personally, but I can just imagine, even though a lot of people say you don't know until you're actually in it, but I can imagine, seeing like your kids there cheering you on, supporting you, like how much like it lights a fire under you to continue to push, to continue to keep going. And it's so cool to see not only your kids are there, but Brittany will be there, and like a bunch of your friends. And I know you mentioned like craft athletes. I know Tim Frericks has been putting in some awesome work too. So super cool to see like you're just going to have this army of support behind you. And that I think is an asset, like you mentioned, right? Like it's an asset to have that support system, especially when they're uplifting you around there. So I think it's going to be great. And I think it's a good transition into Black Canyon, right? We've been kind of talking at it in the answers, and I'm excited to see. I mean, you've been pretty fired up about this race, ever since your last go at Javelina. And so I'm curious, like, and I know you talk about this on Instagram and kind of like your reasonings and whys, but I'm curious to hear on the podcast, and you talk about more. What's kind of like your biggest intention for this race here at Black Canyon, right? And is it more like looking to reach your own potential? Is it looking for a golden ticket? Like, is it like, tell us a little bit more about like what's driving you behind this race here at Black Canyon?
Honestly, like probably my main motivation is to just be with my kids and be with the community. And I'm not saying that to sound like I'm a good person or anything like that, but that's what motivates me the most. So I want to put in the work to justify making the trip and to justify having other people gather to help me. So I want to make sure that I show up and I earn the privilege of getting to toe the line and to run that race and to be with those people who are going to be dedicating days of their lives to support me. It is a golden ticket, and it's a golden ticket race. And I've always felt like, if that I'm capable of qualifying for Western, and I would love to see what I could do on the Western course. It's going to be a loaded field. It was a loaded field the last time I ran it, and the sport has just grown exponentially more competitive, and this race specifically has gotten a lot more competitive. The fun part about being an old guy is like I'm not any more intimidated now than I was then, and maybe that's just ignorance is bliss, but like I know I have certain strengths, and this course plays to some of those strengths. I don't feel like there's anyone in the race who's like out of my league, in terms of like, they may have certain skill sets, but my competencies, maybe match or exceed some of them on other areas. So like on the right day, I feel like, if everything comes together, it would have to be a good day, but, I could see myself getting a ticket. It's kind of funny. The last time I ran it, like I ran for the brand that was the title sponsor for Western. And so several years in a row, I was offered like a comp entry to Western as a sponsored athlete for their team. And I said, I don't want to do that, because I feel like it would be disrespectful to like take a spot without earning it. And because I figured one day I would, and when that time came, if I earned a spot in, I'd probably be in a position to be in the mix. And I've always wanted to be in the mix at Western, but I want to do it the right way. And that's not a knock on anyone who if anyone has a comp entry that they want to give me, I'll take it now that I'm older and it's harder to get in. But at the time I was like, nah, I honestly just wasn't in the right space or phase of my life to dedicate the training to like actually show up and be ready to perform as well as I feel like I could if I put in the time. And so, maybe I am now. If I'm not, got the rest of my life to eventually get there. And, my kids are still young. When I was down there over the holidays, I bumped into, it seems like every time I'm in Flag, I bump into Jeff Browning on the trails, and it's fun, like, to see him, like, he's killing it. I've only actually run against him once or twice. And I remember like blowing him out of the water in a 50K, like, and he was good then. And I was new to the sport, and to see what he has accomplished and how he has evolved as an athlete, and how, some of it is dietary, but some of it is lifestyle, like and that's not a knock on him. Like I knew he was a good runner, and I felt pretty good about myself for having, run as well enough to beat him more than a decade ago at again, like I said, a local 50K that he was probably doing as a training run and stuff like that. But at the time I was like, well, he's supposed to be pretty good, and I just beat him. So to see the evolution that he has made, obviously 50K and 100 miles are very different, but like, I like to see his longevity, and I would like to see myself still in it, whether that's as a quote unquote professional athlete or not, or even a coach or whatever. That part isn't as important to me as just like, I still want to be connected to the sport, still want to be involved. I still want to be running. And so when I see him doing as well as he is, if I get in, it'd be great. If not, still going to, as long as I'm able, I'm still going to keep running. And if that's still a priority or a goal of mine, I hope that eventually I'll get in and have that opportunity. And if not, I'm okay with that too. So.
I love that. And speaking about Jeff Browning is an example too. I mean, I think another good example is like Scott Traer. I mean, he's also a masters athlete, and last year ran a master class on the Black Canyon Trail, a golden ticket, one of the fastest times ever on that course. And, 10th at Western, like, also just a guy who's just killing it, despite having a seasoned career and everything. And I was actually just running with him yesterday, and he was giving me a run for my money. I mean, it's great. And I think we're at the time where there's just so many, it doesn't matter too much about age nowadays. I think experience matters a lot, especially in these kind of races. And we're seeing like a wide variety of athletes just perform at such a high level, no matter what their backgrounds is, where they're at now and everything like that. So I think the playing field is a lot more level than in this sport than I think in any other sport as well. And dude, you're looking fit out there too. I mean, like, I think you're going to be a force to reckon with on race day for sure. And so from your perspective, like, I guess, like, how have you approached training for this race specifically? I know that, you were in Arizona for a little bit too, but in the times that you're not in Arizona too, it's a little cold, it's a little snowy, right? So I'm curious, like, how, I guess, training specifically has been going for this Black Canyon for you, but also maybe sprinkled in there too, because I get a lot of questions all the time. Because I'm fortunate enough to live in Arizona. You can, or Phoenix specifically, you can run all year round, right? It's nice. But some areas, right, if you're training for a race like a Black Canyon or even a Bandera, and you're kind of training in this winter, like, I get questions all the time. It's like, how do I do that? And I'm not apt to answer that because I don't live in those places. So, two-part question there to kind of round it all up. Number one, training for Black Canyon, how are you approaching that? Two, how do you approach the specificity of that desert terrain, even when it's snowy, cold, icy, whole 9 yards from there?
Yeah. Again, you do what you can with the time and resources that you have. So, and I'm certainly not an expert. I'm hoping that it works out. Like I said, I ran Black Canyon before. It was in 2014 or 2015 when I was going to grad school at NAU. So I was in Flagstaff. I was in Arizona, but I was training in the snow on a treadmill. Drop down to run, the orientation runs and run on the course a little bit when I could. But I was trying to work full time and support a family and go to school. So I wasn't able to, be down there very often. I don't feel like I was as prepared as I would have liked to be for the heat. I mean, I think I led for the first 55K of the race, and didn't feel like I was doing anything. I went through 2 bladders in that time, and I probably actually got hyponatremia from overhydrating, but it was also really, so that was like probably 4 liters of electrolyte drink, and I blacked out like right before the Black Canyon aid station, and just kind of hobbled to the finish from there. But I think I was still in like second when I blacked out, and somehow finished in the top 10 in pretty loaded field, but like was very much positive split that race. So I would hope not to do that this time. But I'm dealing with even colder climate this time. So I've spent as much time in Arizona as I could. I ran Javelina at the end of October. Then I spent time there for Thanksgiving. Ran on the course when I was there a couple times around Thanksgiving, and then spent more than a week down there around the Christmas and New Year holidays. Ran mostly in Sedona because I was still, my family was gathered in the Flagstaff area, so I would drop down to Sedona. I don't know, for about a week I did that, and then I was there a few weeks ago on the Black Canyon course again. So doing the best I can to run on the course in the actual terrain, and in the heat. I think running on a treadmill indoors is helpful, despite my preference to run shirtless when I do that. It's probably a good idea to wear layers or put a heater on or things like that. I feel like I'm kind of one of the wrestlers that I used to train with in high school. When I'm out there, I wear lots of layers, and so I'm sweating, and I'm not like putting, plastic bags on me to like absorb the sweat and like lose weight or anything like that. But I'm doing my best to stay as warm as I can. I yesterday went on like a 2-hour run up to a ski resort back from my house, and so tried to harden the quads, but I think it was negative 25 Celsius when I was out there. And so I wore as many layers as I could, just because it was cold. And I mean, I wasn't just wearing running gloves. I was wearing like full on leather, very insulated work gloves. And yeah, so I didn't quite look, I looked like a blue collar runner out there. I didn't look like someone up there skiing. So yeah, but I was running up and down that hill. So yeah, just doing what I can. So
I love that. I think like I love how we keep going back to that theme of like doing what you can, right? Because what you were mentioning before, right? If you're always going for like A+ or A, like the perfection kind of things, sometimes it kind of can deter us from like getting the job done, right? Or even trying, right? We're like, oh, because I, can't fully do this like the right way that I wanted to, I'm just not going to do it. But I think like even like C or B, done is better than perfect, right? Is basically what I'm trying to say here, because at least you're showing up and you're giving the effort and you're kind of doing it, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And then you don't get anywhere. You don't make any progress. You kind of give up more or less. And because you wanted to do it perfect, you don't even make any progress at all. And in the end of the day, what's that thing? And so I love how you take that approach to not just your running, but also your relationships, like you mentioned before, and then going into Black Canyon, seeing the things that you're doing too. with getting some good course time in, which is super great. I'm curious, like, I know Javelina, you went out and you were leading for a good chunk of like the beginning of the race, and then things kind of, at the end, ended up not being the day. But I'm curious, is there anything that you learned from that race specifically that you're going to be translating to Black Canyon in order to help you to, kind of like move forward in there? Because there's similar races, in the sense of, you're not doing a crazy amount of climbing. Like Javelina's a little less technical, point to point race in the Black Canyon, but very much two classic Arizona races. Obviously Javelina is a little hotter, but I mean, Black Canyon last year was 85, so it can creep up there for sure. So curious to hear any lessons from Javelina that you're taking into Black Canyon this year that you're looking to help on to, help you to potentially secure a ticket there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that I did learn at Black Canyon, but you forget if you haven't done it recently. But yeah, just staying cool. So it was cool at Javelina for the first lap, and so I wasn't doing my due diligence to stay cool. I probably didn't hydrate well enough the first lap, and it came back to bite me. I mean, there's a lot of jostling going on, and I didn't really find myself. I didn't try to take the lead. Like I was trying to. I feel like I spent the first little bit at Javelina just trying to catch the leaders because I got stuck behind quite a train of people. First few miles and the previous year, what had happened was I didn't even realize that the guys that went 1-2 were even in the race. Like they pulled away and I was stuck in this train, and I figured that I was just running with everyone else, and there were two guys way off the front that went on to go 1-2, and the rest of us that were in the quote unquote chase pack, we were a long ways back, and there was no way we were going to catch them. When I realized, in lap 2 and 3 that they were that was going on. So I tried to run with the leaders at Javelina, and then they both dropped, like unintentionally. I can't remember exactly. Like I think it was Arlen Glick and Patrick Reagan were leading, and I was just sitting. I worked my way up to sit on them, and then Arlen tripped and actually like slid off a wash. And yeah, you were in there. And then Patrick, something happened, like it's like his hat got blown off or something like that. But both were just like freak things, and like kind of like I didn't want to lead, so I like stopped, and it was kind of like almost like one of those collisions you see at the Tour de France, like where people are like, "What do we do?" And I full on was like ready to get off the course and wait for them to catch up. I didn't want to lead, but anyway, I found myself in the lead, and then Dakota and I were going back and forth, and there were a few other people that kind of popped up and back, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like I was like, competing at that point. I was just like, oh shit. I want to be leading on the last lap, not in the first or the second lap.
Right.
And Matt Daniels hopped in and pulled away, and so I mean there was some jostling, but it certainly wasn't where I wanted to be in terms of like quote unquote pushing the pace. I think from an outsider's perspective, it looked like I was trying to break away, and it was like, no, I'm trying to not be up here is what I really wanted to run behind other people. So I want to try and do a better job of that at Black Canyon. I know last time I ran Black Canyon as well, I have really big feet, and I like running downhill, and I don't like riding the brakes because I feel like that messes up my quads more than it helps save my legs. And so I found myself kind of stuck behind people, and even before we got on the actual Black Canyon Trail, there's kind of some areas where it had been muddy, but then it turned like the mud had dried into clay, and so that was uncomfortable and kind of technical, but just kind of obnoxious. And so I just kind of pulled ahead just because I didn't want to step on people's feet, and I didn't want to like be riding the brakes, and then I found myself way out in front, kind of again unintentionally. So I guess I just need to do a better job of biding my time and not taking the lead too soon. So part of the when Caleb and I were running it the other day, it was kind of like, okay, I don't want to be in the lead at this point in the race, and probably don't want to be in the lead at this point in the race. And yeah, I'd be okay if I were in the lead by this point in the race. But so just kind of try to be okay. Not, I don't know. I from the time I was in high school, I liked leading just because it's like I don't like stepping on people's heels. I don't like being the guy whose heels are being stepped on, but I definitely don't want to be that guy that's like, and I don't like my stride being broken. I like just running. So it's hard for me. It's not because I like trying to put on a show. It's not because of there's no ego involved. It's just like my personal preference is to not step on people's heels and not have my heels be stepped. I just want to run. I don't want to be in a herd. I'm used to running by myself 99% of the time. So I get kind of claustrophobic when I'm surrounded by people. And so, yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable, but it's what it is. So.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people signed up for this race too. I think it's like close to like 1,000, which is something crazy like that this year. And it's a tight trail in most parts too. So I totally feel you. It's like, you kind of got to play this game of like, you don't want to be too far behind, because then you got kind of like that conga line, like you mentioned before, and you're kind of just like behind people, but you don't want to get too far ahead, especially like in this race with that screaming downhill in the beginning. Yeah. I mean, that first section, as you know, I mean, is just, that is prone for people to just zoom it out there. And some people will easily clip, sub sevens on there like it's just nothing. And then usually when you get to that third section where it's like kind of like choppy and everything, that's like where the carnage happens. One other thing I'm curious, and this is like more like obviously it applies to Black Canyon, but just in general, right? One of the things that I think is like a hard skill is kind of like what we're talking about here. It's like pacing, right? I think it's a tough skill, but it's probably one of the most important skills. Curious to see if you agree on that in terms of like an ultra runner. I mean, that's what I kind of think, and starting to learn a lot more at Javelina. I had probably one of the most disgusting positive splits ever. Like I just went out way too hot in the beginning, and then just like continued just to get fried later on. And like you look at the pace chart on Strava, and it's like reminiscent of like the Black Canyon elevation slope, just really high in the beginning and down. And so I asked this too, because I also struggle with this as well. But I guess like what's your approach to pacing smart, right? And I know like you mentioned in the beginning of, you don't want to be in the lead. You kind of want to be bar back, but like, how does that look like in application? Because I think it's so hard to, and I experienced this firsthand at Javelina. Like I told myself, I was like, I'm going to go slow. Gun goes off and I'm at the front and just going on it. And then of course I eat my own dog food at the end and just get destroyed. So to reel it all back in here, like what is good pacing? Like how do you approach good pacing, when it comes to you, or maybe something that you suggest in your athletes when it comes to race day, to really like run a well race where you're not just like kind of holding on for dear life at the end?
I'm going to say something controversial, and that is that, I don't think that in an ultra, especially with the different variables, elevation profile, heat and everything, I don't think that a successful race necessarily has to be a negative split race. In fact, other than Nick Curry, there are very few people who can run negative splits on most courses in the desert or in general. And I mean, hats off to him, but I don't think that that's the only sign of success. Like there's a lot of benefit to it. But I don't think it's necessary. I would say if I were to view it from a road perspective, it's kind of like the Boston Marathon. Like it's pretty hard to not get sucked into running a little bit fast in the first couple miles of Boston, or even CIM. And again, I feels good to run a negative split. And if you can train and race that way, that's great. But I especially on something like Black Canyon, I think too many people get too fixated on pace or just other metrics that are like going to vary from place to place. Like there are too many variables to take into account. Like, yep, it's going to be getting hotter throughout the day. It's going to, there's going to be some ups, there's going to be some downs, stuff like that. So I don't know that, that's the only way to determine whether one has a successful race. That being said, yeah. So for example, I still want to feel like I'm running, and by that I don't mean like I want to avoid injury. I don't want to get. It's not like a track race where I'm going to get stepped on and spiked, but at the same time, like I don't want to sprain my ankle because I'm stepping on someone's heels. I don't want to sprain someone else's ankle by stepping on their heels, and I don't necessarily think it's beneficial to ride the brakes. Like, it just doesn't work for my gait. So I will probably run, by some people's standards, somewhat foolhardy. But I will try to run within myself. And then I will try to do my best. Like, there are a couple different stream crossings. There are ways to manage the heat at aid stations with ice. At Javelina the last 2 years, I've used a vest almost principally. Like, I haven't even carried anything in the vest. I've just carried everything either in my handhelds or in my back pocket. And then the vest I've just used to fill with ice just to keep my core body temperature cool. Some people use neck gaiters. Those get too tight for me. And but the vest has worked. So I will probably use that if it's going to be hot. I would like to run in such a way that I still feel like I can be in hunting mode, so to speak. So I need to save my legs a little bit, and I need to save my mind, and I need to make sure that I certainly don't want to go anaerobic. I want to keep it below my threshold, just both muscularly, but also aerobically, because like that's not efficient in terms of metabolism, in terms of consumption of food, things like that. So, yeah, I don't feel like I really answered your question, but I feel like I would be doing athletes that I coach a disservice, and even others in the sport a disservice by saying that there's only one way to consider an ultra success. Like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who actually negative splits every trail ultra. Like, you know, certainly it's nice when, like, so for example, I ran negative splits yesterday because I ran up a mountain and then turned around and ran down the mountain. So of course I ran faster on the way down. When I ran 50 miles on the treadmill, it was a negative split, but in the same way, I still tried to stick to the same principles that I'm describing now. Like, I tried to run a certain pace, but when I realized that pace was actually constricting me, I just gradually kept increasing the pace, even though, like, in theory that was going to, like, leave me high and dry. And I just said, like, my knees keep hitting the front of the treadmill. This is stupid. Like, it's not comfortable that I'm going too slow. So I just gradually kept increasing the pace until I was running a minute per mile faster than my goal pace was. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, we just passed a marathon. That was faster than I was planning on, but I'm not going to slow down. Like, I'm just going to keep doing this as long as I can. And then I finally got to the point where it was like, I'll just get this thing over with. And so I just kept accelerating. And obviously that was one of those rare days where things, like, the stars just kind of aligned and things were clicking. But and there weren't the variables of the heat and I had fans and I had my fuel right there, and I was on a treadmill, not on an undulating course with cacti that jump out and grab you and stuff like that. But I still feel like everyone should run their own race, and that's how I run best. Again, like I said, maybe it's foolhardy. it's the Oregonian. Even though I grew up in the Southwest, I went to high school in Oregon, and so I bought into the whole pre stuff, and I still feel like I run best when I run free, and that doesn't mean I have to be out in front. It just means I need to run my own race. And yeah, some of the old heads may think that's foolish, but that's all right.
Yeah, that's all right. I love that. And it like seems like just like a personal approach, like really pacing can get into it, right? Like guys like Nick Curry, like you mentioned, can do good on like a negative split. But I mean, even like you look at people like Camille Herron, right? She runs hard in the beginning, like just hard. And she looks like she like feeds on that. So I love that approach, how like you take it. It's like, you know, negative split or even like an even split race, like isn't always the most optimal thing. It sounds like what you're saying, that, like the most optimal thing is the one that best tailors your kind of personal strategy and mentality.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think as long as you're running on your terms, I think it's, I think if we all did life on our terms, like if we, yeah, of course there are like certain constraints that we have to adhere to as members of society and stuff like that. But like, if we all lived according to like what, if we could all agree that there are basic values that we want to, you know, try to adhere to, and we live life on our terms, and we stop worrying about what other people think. Like even at Javelina, like there were people that I saw on the side of the course that like, I know personally that they were thinking, what an idiot. And I also know personally, in fact, I heard it from some of them, like, why did you do that? And all the rest. Is like, one, I've run faster than half the people that were criticizing me. So it's like, I don't really care what they think. And two, it's like, I did it because that's like, one, you didn't see what happened out there. You didn't see Arlen fall off. You didn't see Patrick. Like I was trying to run the smart race, which was, I don't want to get dropped by the leaders and then have like hours to make up. Like Nick passed me during the race. He didn't catch the leaders. I think he honestly thought he might be able to. He ran a really smart race, but he didn't catch the leaders. And so my goal was, I want to make sure that I'm in the mix. If and when there's a break, I want to be there to make that move. And that was at Javelina. In the same way, I want to be there at Black Canyon. What will that look like? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I want to be there, and I want to put myself in a position to be successful. And if I'm not in the mix, by successful, I want to put myself in a position to get a ticket. If I do that and I blow up, at least I know I tried. But it's a really frustrating thing when it's like, I went for it and I just didn't realize that there were three guys so far off the front that I couldn't even see them because I was so caught up on running conservative and being smart and worried about what people might say if I end up being the idiot out in front. Like, I'm too old to care about what other people think at this point. Like I seriously don't care. I've accomplished way more than I ever thought I ever would in the sport. So like at this point, it's all gravy. And like, if I make a fool of myself, it won't be the first time, probably won't be the last. And most people will be pretty stoked if I do well. So I'll be pretty stoked. So like, I guess I don't care either way, other than like, as long as I put myself in the mix, like I'll be fine. Like I'll be happy with whatever the outcome is. So.
Yeah, and add me to the list of people who would be stoked if you got it too. So I know I'll be stoked to see you get it, man, because it's just been like so awesome to like have your journey. And I think you know, I love the approach, even that you mentioned there, saying like sometimes when you can run conservatively, I feel like you can like almost like rob yourself of your potential. Like, and I've had this conversation with people. It's like sometimes you run too slow that like there's too big of a gap, and then you're just kind of like clawing your way into a battle that you can't even touch at that point. So it's like you gotta like hit the fine line between obviously like pacing to your own abilities, but at the same time, you know, sometimes being too conservative might hurt you at the end of the day. And like there's like those two trains of camp there, but I think in the end of the day, where it kind of encapsulates your answer there, which I thought you just awesomely like answered, was you got to find what works best for you. You got to like run your own race, like kind of run the mile that you're in to kind of bring it back from before, and then focusing on that will have you have your best race going forward, right? And I even like, you know, that point of when you mentioned before, it's like having the people in the head that's saying, oh, like, you know, you're like, they have like a certain opinion about the way that you're racing and stuff like that, right? when you ditch those things, I feel like it can be so easy just to be free. Like, you know, like you mentioned, kind of like the pre-mentality, like run on your own terms and just have that in there. And so, I think that's awesome, man. And I think just a combination of the way that you're approaching that, the way that you're keeping your kids and your family top of mind when you're racing, and just the training you've been putting in, man, I think you're going to be, ready to rip it in Black Canyon in a few weeks here. And I'm excited to, toe the line with you again, man. It's going to be a lot of fun to see you out there and to see what you can do. And man, I'm excited for that race. And for anyone here who's listening, who wants to follow along your journey, who isn't following you already, which totally suggest anyone could, before I ask my last question here, where can they find you all on the interwebs, on the social media, coaching business, everything like that, if they want to follow along the fun of the Jacob Puzey adventure at Black Canyon?
I will be the best place is probably on Instagram at Jacob Puzey. And then from there, you can follow the race series that I direct at 5 Peaks Run, or the coaching that I do at Team Peak Run or Peak Run Performance, or there's a stage race that I put on as well at Trans South Kirks Run. All of them are places you can follow me, and there will be URLs to each of those websites from each of those accounts. That's probably the best place though. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll put those in the show notes as well. So if you want to head on to those links right now, feel free to check out the show notes in here as well. Super cool. I'm going to have to do one of your races one time for sure, man. They look absolutely
Love
epic.
to have you. Yeah. They're a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. They look great. And so, Jacob, it's been awesome chatting with you. I love how we covered a wide breadth of subjects here, like from family to relationships to pacing to cactuses that jump out at you. We covered the whole spectrum here. But this show is all about helping our listeners really become better endurance athletes. So I'm curious from your perspective, and this is the question that I ask all my guests here. And I think this is something we started doing after we had our last conversation. So this will be the first time hearing this answer, which will be super cool. That is, what can our listeners do every single day to be a better endurance athlete?
Ooh.
Hit you with the heavy one on the last one.
Yeah. No, there's a lot that people can do. And one thing that strikes me about endurance athletics is that there really are good people in the sport. And I actually have a brother. He's a musician. My family's fairly musical. I'm like the black sheep of the family because I don't sing or play any musical instruments. But my brother AJ has a song, and one of the lines, I like the way he tells the story. It's about. I think it's called John and Jesus, and he talks about these quote unquote prophets as if they are these wise men, but they're actually just a bunch of guys hanging out and throwing back a couple of cold ones, and one of them says to the other, they're basically talking about rules to live by, and one of them says to the other, just don't do what an asshole would do. So I honestly don't be an asshole. When I was recruited to run for craft, that was one of the policies. We have a no asshole policy, and it was all right, cool. I don't think everyone that knows me would agree that I'm not one, but I try not to be. And honestly, I more and more as I go through life, if I'm good with who I am as a person and as a parent and as a partner and as a business partner or whatever it might be, as a neighbor, as a member of my community, if I feel if I feel like I'm good enough, if I feel like I'm doing what I have signed up to do and I've committed to do, running's easy. Running's the dessert, running's the icing on the cake. It's or in this case, I live in Canada, so it's the gravy on top of the French fries, it's on top of the poutine. It's running is something that we get to do, but I don't feel good running if the rest of my life is if I don't feel like I've at least made my best effort to do the best that I can, and usually that means letting go of tension and letting go of just stress, like running doesn't, I don't feel good. I don't feel like I can run well if running is one added stress to my life. But if I can make it a way in which I can process things in my life and I can be a better person, then and not be an asshole, that's a good thing. Like, I don't want to be that to people that I'm driving next to my kids, to my friends, and even to total strangers, even to people who are assholes to me on social media. Like that would be my goal. So I sorry, that's probably more, you're going to have to like cut out the whole answer, but that's me evangelizing, I guess, about how to be a better runner. I feel like just being kind to oneself and being kind to others, like, really makes running a lot easier. And then you get to do it with other good people, and we get to go to races like Black Canyon. I get to see guys like you, and we get to share miles and stories on the trails, and we get to pick each other up when we fall down, and we get to share gels, and we get to do, like, it's a really cool thing when we get to like gather with like-minded people who also aren't assholes. And so it's a good thing like that. Honestly, so if you want to be a good runner, there's a no asshole policy, and just be a good person. So
I think that's the best answer that I've gotten to that question on this podcast. And let me tell you, there's one guy who lives that. It's you, man. Because I even said in the beginning of the podcast, you're one of the nicest dudes I've met in the ultra community. And like, I know anyone who knows you and speaks of you too also says the same exact thing. So you live it too. And I love how you brought like the importance of, seeing the other areas of your life. And like, for anyone listening here too, I mean, Jacob lives this. We scheduled this podcast interview around the times he had to spend time with kids and pick them up and everything. So just know that Jacob definitely walks the walk here as well, as a nice guy, follows the no asshole policy, and is just a great family man. And man, I'm excited to align with you at Black Canyon. I'm gonna be trying to keep up with you out there, man. You're looking
Thanks,
fit.
Man. It's gonna be fun. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of us, so we should have a lot of people to carry us from Mayer High School all the way to the finish. So it'll be good. Yeah.
It'll be fun, man. I'm looking forward to trading miles and good conversation with you out there, my friend. And hopefully we get no cactuses in us this year either.
That's a goal. That will be a victory for sure. So, all right.
Absolutely. Jacob, thanks so much for coming on, man. This is awesome.